Hi, everybody. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me? You have to be able to hear me. I mean, I'm a really loud person. Thank you so much for coming to our session today. We're going to talk about what goes into successful collaboration between large institutions, cultural institutions, and Native communities. And I think that everybody who comes to ATALM, obviously we're kind of a self-selected group. Our hearts are in the right place, but that doesn't automatically translate into a successful project. Successful projects, at least in my experience, are the product of a lot of groundwork, a lot of mutually agreed upon expectations, and then, frankly, the materials and the knowledge and the support to make something productive out of a collaboration. And we have two examples of what we consider successful collaborative projects. Rachel Menyuk, let me back up. I'm Michael Pond. It's my privilege to be the head archivist at the National Museum of the American Indian. And my colleague, Rachel Menyuk, is our processing archivist. Last summer, summer of 2016, Nina Sanders was an intern at NMAI and worked on a specific project that Rachel and Nina will tell you about. Brian Carpenter is an archivist at the American Philosophical Society, and Betsy Bissell is a language teacher at Tuscarora. So the American Philosophical Society and the Tuscarora community have been working together for a long time as well. So we're going to start with Rachel and Nina. We're going to then go to Brian and Betsy, and we'd like to save a lot of time at the end of our session for, if not questions, just discussion. I think that this is a topic that really lends itself to conversation as opposed to monologue, so we look forward to talking with you about this.
Oh, nope. That's yours. That's somebody else's. Where did mine go? Okay. Does anybody know how to make it so it's not? Oh, no, it's good. Okay. Hello. As Michael said, my name is Rachel Menyuk, and I'm a processing archivist at the National Museum of the American Indian. I've been at NMAI for over 7 years now, and I've worked with a lot of our collections, which contain materials from all over North and South America. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the history of the Museum of the American Indian High Foundation was an institution founded in New York City in 1916 and collected hundreds of thousands of objects from all over, like I said, North and South America. But along with the objects, many of these collectors and anthropologists made field notes and took photographs in the field. And all of those materials became the foundation for the Museum of the American Indian High Foundation records. Now, this collection of materials is massive. It's over 600 boxes of materials that document the history of the museum and the history of collecting at the beginning of the 1900s. One of the things, though, is that these materials, they had lots of different types. We have papers, we have photographs, we have audio recordings, we have film, we have slides, and all of these things were separated because that was sort of the practice of museums back in the day. So we might have papers from a collector that made it into the MAI records, and then have photographs from that same collector that ended up in our photo collections. So one of the collectors where this was the case, and Nina's going to talk a little more specifically about him, was William Wildshoot, who did a lot of collecting in the 1920s in Montana among the Crow. So we had this collection of papers of his, which had things like catalog lists and purchase records and notes about where he was and what he was buying and who he was talking to and And those were sort of separated from the photographs he took among the Crow. Both of these collections were heavily used by researchers, and the papers had been somewhat processed, but the photographs had never been really organized in any meaningful way. There were catalog records for them with captions that were very descriptive, and this was something that we wanted to focus on, was to start taking these photographs and creating guides for them so people could use them. But something that I've always been interested in is, what does a guide look like that's useful to the community from which the photographs were made? So I can take photographs and organize them in a way that's, okay, these were all taken in 1919, these were all taken in 1920, it looks like these are all of the same person, but is that going to be meaningful to a community when they're trying to look at these photographs? So I had been in conversation with several folks. One was Tim McCleary, who's at Little Bighorn College, because he had been working with these Crow photographs, and he had given some suggestions about changing captions. And then I had been talking with Joe Horscapture, who was formerly a curator at the National Museum of the American Indian, now is at the Minnesota Historical Society. I said, I have this really, really wonderful collection of Crow photographs, and I'd like for it to be organized in a way that makes sense to the community. I don't necessarily have the skills to do that. Do you have any suggestions, since Joe had been in the process of working among the Crow? And I said, do you have any suggestions about how to go about it? And he said, well, actually, I have a friend and collaborator, Nina Sanders, who will be here at the museum for a program called Recovering Voices. Why don't you talk to her then and see if she's interested in coming and working with this collection? So I was like, wow, that's the best idea I've ever heard. And Nina, who was part of Recovering Voices, which is a language revitalization project, came, and the two of us sat down and we had a conversation. I said, I have these photographs. I don't think that I have the knowledge to really organize them in the way that I think they should be organized. Is this something that you would be interested in doing?
Showrava Janina who kichik dalon do Hodahil and Yulabaja go. Hinawaba chiki chik devon le Hodahil took leo ble ichigashig. You guys are my friends. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the work that you do. I hope that you get something good from this panel. So I'm Crow, as you already know. She kind of laid the groundwork for that. These are my ancestors. This is my great-grandmother, the people in the black and white photograph. That photograph was taken by William Wiltshute. She is the mother of those children that this woman is carrying. Her name is Annie Medicine Crow. She is the daughter of Chief Medicine Crow. If you ever Google his name, he's got photographs all over the internet. We'll come back to that. Everything will come full circle. So I went through the internship program through NMAI, which is something that's incredibly complicated. And out of 300 applicants, you have to be, I think they select about 20 to 30 people. I was fortunate to have Michael and Rachel vouch for me, and stroke of luck, I got in. And they gave me an office space. This was my coworker. This photograph here is important because not only do I have a wonderful relationship with Kelsey, who is an archivist, but the huge photograph in the back is of a Crow woman and her baby, and I'm a Crow mother. So I thought that that was a really wonderful omen. This is my space. All of these files right here are, I don't know, those weren't mine, but these files on this red cart right here are part of the archives. It took me about a month to completely understand what it even meant to process these photographs and these papers, to kind of even understand how to work the toolkit, which is the database that we used. And then I finally was able to start to process all of these photographs. And I organized them, as Rachel had said. We put them into groups of chiefs, into groups with families, parades. There were things that had to do with the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and then we categorized them. And then what I did was I essentially had to get images of them, and we compiled them. I reached out to my tribe They paid for me to have a plane ticket to fly out. I met with the culture committee. I met with the elders. I met with students at Little Bighorn College. And they sent me to Crow. And so I took all of these photographs that William Wiltshire took and essentially showed them to everyone, and they were able to have input. They remembered a lot of these people because these photographs were taken between 1917 and 1928, which is when William Wiltshire was on the Crow Reservation. Not only did he take photographs, but he collected the majority of the material that is in the NMAI Museum collection. He took film. He also wrote manuscripts for medicine bundles, the beadwork book, which I think if you have anything to do with like native art or beadwork, you've probably seen it or read it. This man did an incredible job on behalf of the High Foundation in doing field work. He chronicled a point in time when we were transitioning from our war party days into reservation life. And these people no longer needed things like sword scabbards and the things that they were using when they were off the reservation, so they were selling them because obviously reservation life wasn't easy and people needed to eat. So he was fortunate in the way that he was able to do a lot of collecting of specimens that were created between about 1850, even before 1850, all the way up to about 1920. And this is Chief Pleniku. He was our last tribal war chief. These are some of his photographs. This is a little Crow girl. She's getting ready to parade. Obviously, this is reservation era. We had already started our annual Crow Fair celebration, which I imagine she was preparing for. As you can see, we were using wagons. People were living in tents. So I took all of these photographs back and was able to kind of understand what the community wanted, how they wanted to see this organized and processed, and most importantly, what shouldn't be seen by the public, because William Wiltshire took photographs of burial sites. He took photographs of open medicine bundles, things that, by the grace of NMAI Archives, they've never digitized them. They agreed not to digitize them. And if someone or a researcher comes in and wants access to those photographs that are sensitive, they have to get permission from the tribe. This is a scary group of the Culture Committee. That's an entire presentation by itself. I had to listen. I had to be a really good listener and be told, like, I have to go through this spiel because I work in museums. The first thing that they always say to me, and like, yes, is don't open the medicine bundles. Don't take them down, don't mess with them, don't try to bring them home. And I'm aware of this, but because these are my elders and they care about me, it's something that I have to listen to and be reminded every time I go home. So this was the Culture Committee. They were the ones who kind of decided what was going to happen. Or how's the time?
Oh, you're doing great.
Oh, okay. So now I brought all of the photographs back. I better understood how they should be arranged. We put Crow names onto certain things like horses, cradle boards, dresses, sword scabbards, all of the different things that appear in these photographs, so that researchers and Crows who maybe don't live on the reservation or do not speak our language can see those words, read those words, think about those words and what they mean. So if you go to the SOVA and you look at this particular collection and you look at the descriptions, you're going to see a lot of Crow words in there. And we felt like that was an important part of that because in some ways it's indigenizing archives. And it's from the community, for the world, and most importantly for the community, because most of the people on my reservation, out of 10,000 people, they're never going to be able to come to NMAI and see these photographs. And this is just a small chunk of photographs for Crow. I mean, I think there's like thousands of Crow photographs, right? And this was about 250 of them. So this photograph right here, as I showed you in the very beginning, is a photograph that's been in my family ever since I was a little girl. My great-grandmother would take it out, my grandmother took it out, and then when we had the little scanners at Walgreens, I snatched it from my grandmother and scanned it, and now I have it in my house. I would put it in my cubicle, and this is something I did throughout my life. This picture's just gone everywhere with me. And when I went to do this work, and they gave me all the files, they're negatives, and I'm going through the negatives, halfway through, and this took weeks to do, I pull this, and it's the photograph that belonged to my great-grandmother. And there's just this moment oh my God, this is my grandma's photo. Well, William Wildschut knew our family, and he took this picture, and he made, we think he made a copy and gave that to my grandmother, because when I took it to Rachel and Michael, and I said, I have this photo, let me show you, and I showed them on my phone this photo that I had, and they're like, well, there's only a negative, there hasn't been a print ever made of this, so it must have come from him or someone who had access to these negatives. So it was this sort of full circle moment in understanding that I was supposed to be there, that there was a relationship with my ancestors and how they brought me into this space to sort of curate all of these photographs. And they became so personal to me that it sort of shifted the way that I saw collection methods by anthropologists in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. And there was a healing process that happened in that, because when you're a young Native person, you sort of have this idea that, well, they came and they took everything, and they were, grave robbing, and, but after I read all of his letters, and I saw this photograph, and I really thought about the relationship that he had with my family, it helped me to reframe things and see that things are not so black and white. No pun intended. There's a lot of gray area. And that I learned how to be really thankful to this man for the time that he took and spent on our reservation, taking these photographs and collecting these objects, because not only was I able to take these photos home, I was able to take photographs of a lot of the objects that he collected, and we've been able to revitalize some of our beadwork traditions through taking photos of these objects that were collected by Wildschut on the reservation. And one of those things is the traditional Crow floral style. And this style of floral isn't widely practiced, or wasn't widely practiced even just 20 years ago. It's symmetrical. We use the same colors. Crow beadwork, it's, as David Penny knows, is an entirely different story on its own, but this man gave back to our community in ways that I don't think he even understood. He was doing something for a museum collection, for High, for researchers, scholars, but eventually what's happened is that it's given so much to our community. We're able to see our family members, our chiefs. We're able to think about what they were wearing at that time, revitalize some of those traditions. So it's such a valuable source of knowledge in the fact that as Native people, we're able to come back into museums and do that work and be the people who initiate that work with the support of museum professionals. I think we've sort of initiated healing. And we're doing the work that we've all really been talking about, which is true collaboration. There is a story about this photograph and everything that I just told you about on the Smithsonian collections. I think we're going to go to that link once I move, and I'm going to give it back to Rachel.
So, in addition to the success of just creating a really wonderful working relationship with Mina and having her go back to her community, be able to take these photographs in person back, what we were also able to do was create a guide online that is accessible to anyone now within the community with all of these photographs, with Nina's descriptions online. So I'm actually going to go there and show it to you. So the Smithsonian Online Virtual Archive is a wonderful place to go visit if you're not familiar with it. It is a database, a search tool for all of the archival collections across the Smithsonian. So this is, when does it start? Is it? Hold on, sorry. So it's showing up on mine, but not on here.
wait and tell it to mirror?
Did you hear that? Alt F8. No, it's not doing anything.
Because it was showing. Whoa.
Wow, that button did
I was
something
like,
totally
lighting.
unexpected.
Hold on, let me just do this. I think I just need to end the slideshow.
Maybe function F8 then.
Oh my gosh. There we go. I don't know what I did, but apparently I was starting a dance party. Okay, so this is the Smithsonian Online Virtual Archive. And what we're going to do is we're just going to search for the William Wildschut collection. And it's thinking about it. And you see how it has this little box. It says digitized content. And we can go. And it has description that Nina wrote about the contents of the collection. Each series has a description. And a little historical note about William Wildschut himself. So let's go back to the top. This laptop is being testy. So as you can see, each series, these are the series that Nina decided would be the most useful to organize it in. And we can actually look at each series and see the photographs online. So they're all viewable online with the captions that Nina wrote. And this is a great resource now for anybody within the community to be able to access all of these images online. Were you going to add something?
I was just going to say that in addition to the materials that are online, when Nina consulted with her culture committee and their tribal authorities, she came back with a letter saying that they approve of putting these materials online and specifying the photographs that they asked us not to put online. So now we have a paper trail documenting what.
See, as you can see, this one.
Yeah. So we were able to build a relationship with the community and do the appropriate thing with the collection as the tribal authority dictated. And that's, as part of the Smithsonian, it's really important to say that we view these relationships that we have with sovereign nations as a government-to-government relationship. So getting that letter, that document from the tribal council was really important for us.
You wanted me to look at the... Sorry, one more thing. Nina just wanted to show you. At the end, I usually request that our interns write a blog post about their experience. And Nina wrote this beautiful blog post that all suggest you go and read. And it is the most viewed blog post on the Smithsonian Collections blog to this day. So, most page views. So please feel free to go and find it. And yeah, I think that sort of concludes our portion. I just wanted to add that, we do at the Smithsonian, and I'm sure at a lot of other big repositories, we have all these standards that we use. We have EAD, and we have finding aids, and we have databases and systems, but there are ways to incorporate traditional knowledge into those systems. And I think this is a good example of one way to do that. And it's important to keep in mind that, yes, we do have these systems, but we can tweak them and make them work for us. So.
That's a good idea.
Where's the slideshow?
It's
It's this one?
Yeah.
Okay. I always forget where that
I
is.
know, because it's like, it's the most important thing, and it's tiny.
Okay, well, I want to say thank you to Michael for putting together this panel, and it's an honor to talk in front of such a distinguished and knowledgeable audience, and to be up here with all of you as well. My name is Brian Carpenter. I'm the curator of the Native American collections at the American Philosophical Society. You may wonder, why do a bunch of philosophers have material relating to Native people and cultures? I'll get to that in a minute. But I find that I kind of can blather on too long with background information. So right at the start, I want to just say the main points is that over the last several years, we've had the very good fortune to work with Tuscarora Nation in digitizing all of the materials at APS, minus one little thing that we're still working on that maybe we can talk about, and to get it to the community in a way that makes sense for them for what they want to do. Archives are very good at making big lists of everything that's in the collections, and I think a lot of the way we had done reference requests from communities in the past would be like, get all the scans done and give a kind of a big data dump at the end, and kind of leave it there, because we didn't really have the capacity or know-how of what to do next. So we had a grant project starting in 2010 or so to work with 4 Native nations, one of which was Tuscarora Nation. And what we really learned from that, the core thing is that these are obvious to all of you, and in retrospect to us as well, but is that the community has the best ideas on what to do with the material. It's not just a matter of them having the knowledge and the sovereignty over it, that's obvious, but it's also much more practical if you're a non-Native institution to not come into the community and say, hey, we've got all this great stuff and we've thought of a great thing that you should do with it, so what do you say? But rather to say, here's our understanding of what's in our collections. How can we get it to you in a way that makes sense to what you're already doing? And we can share ideas we've had from working with other people. And so the other thing that we've learned from working with Tuscarora is there was an initial task, an initial project that brought us together, which was to get all the stuff digitized and get it there. But then we finished with that. And then the question is, well, what do you do next? There's something beneficial about creating a relationship. How do you continue that into the future? And so I'll give some reflections on that, but I'll try to be brief because Betsy's the one with the real knowledge up here. This picture is of Tony Wallace. This is from 1948. He's the guy on the right, the youngster on the right with Nellie Gansworth and Dan Smith, Tuscarora speakers and elders. And this is a wire recording machine, brief but very interesting recording technology. One of the reasons that Tuscarora and APS were brought together is because Tony's papers are at the APS and his recordings, and I don't know how it all worked, but I think it was his connection with both the community and with us that helped get things started. So I'll say a little bit about, what's the heck? It sounds like we're a society for philosophers in America. This is what I wondered before I started working there as well. By way of explanation, it was founded, we're in Philadelphia, right next to Independence Hall. It was founded by Ben Franklin and his various gentlemen scientists, amateur scientist friends. They wanted to have a society where they could get together and share ideas about what we now would call the natural sciences, but at that time they called it natural philosophy. So it's philosophy in that sense, not like the meaning of life and stuff. One of the early presidents of the APS was Thomas Jefferson, who was president of APS before, during, and after he was president of the U.S. So when, for example, he got the Lewis and Clark expedition together, he brought Lewis to APS to learn what there was that white folks knew about the West, which was very little. And then the Lewis and Clark notebooks ended up back at APS. Jefferson also had this interest in collecting vocabularies of native languages and then comparing them to try to get a sense of the history of how tribes related to each other. Let it not go unmentioned that his purpose in this was not just scientific, but to develop policies that the United States could impose upon Native people, which were obviously very destructive, and he really got it started. But you'll notice on the list that Tuscarora is one of the languages here. So our relationship with Tuscarora, without our really realizing it for 200 years, goes back this far. In the 20th century, with the explosion of professional anthropologists and linguists, such as Franz Boas, you see in the back right, and with George Hunt, who's a Kwakwaka'wakw speaker and who worked with Boaz for many years. Boaz developed this methodology that's still used to try to understand how cultures understand themselves in their own terms. And he developed these methods for these interlinear texts you may have seen in some archival documents. Boaz and his students and their students gave a lot of their papers to the APS, so that's why a lot of the material is now at APS. There's a lot of linear feet. The material goes back to 1553 through June of this year. It's from all over the Americas, and there's a ton of audio material as well. This is kind of a visual representation. This is just from a few years ago of where the audio comes from. There's a lot of, if you add in the manuscript stuff, there's a lot of, it fills in a lot more. But this is a really statistical and impersonal way of representing it. There's stories behind all these dots and knowledge that we need to seek guidance from to represent the material correctly. So we had this project from 2008 to 2014. This is when I started, which was to digitize all of the audio collections. Part of this project, we had 4 partnering tribes: Tuscarora Nation, Penobscot Nation, Eastern Band of the Cherokee, and then 2 or 3 actual Ojibwe nations as well. And part of what was built into this was not just to get the files to the tribes and see it later, but to learn what does relationship building mean. So part of the funding was for the tribes to come to the library, and this is really important because they could choose whoever they wanted to come. Because if you go to a lot of institutions, a lot of the funding opportunities, the first thing it says is you must have a PhD or you must be this or that. In this grant, it said if you want to send teachers, send teachers. If you want to send government officials, if it's elders, whomever. So Tuscarora Nation sent a lot of teachers, history and language teachers, and elders to come down in a big group. And we also had funding for us to visit there, to also put a face to this, imposing institutional name for all the people who couldn't come to visit. After some initial visits, they were also able to send a couple of young people, Mia McKee and Monty Hill, who are now both graduate students doing amazing things. And they spent about 3 or 4 weeks or so scanning everything. So we digitized all the audio, but we hadn't done all the manuscripts and the photographs. So they were like, let's get to work. So they were great, and they worked way faster than I anticipated, so they kept me on my toes. There's a lot more photographs. This is Dan Smith again. And there's a lot more linguistic material that wasn't even related to audio collections. One was by this obscure Belgian linguist named Frans Olbrechts, who had a lot of really interesting linguistic material and grammatical analysis from the 20s and 30s, which I was told was a period where it was good to have information on how the language was being spoken at that particular time. There were a lot of texts. You saw Boaz's text before. Or Hunt's text. There was more of that type of thing from Olbrechts. A few thousand pages they got through altogether, including a lot of historical documents, some going back to early 1700s, relating to Tuscarora in North Carolina. We got this. It was mainly, especially used in the school, and Betsy can tell about all that. But some of the students wrote very nice letters, sort of talking about their thoughts about the material, and they reflected upon talked about how they can now tell the stories again. And this made us really understand that, this knowledge, these stories, been around for a long time, and they just had this real brief life written down on paper or on these tapes. But now they're back in the oral tradition, being shared again. Just a couple final thoughts about what we've learned, because now we're working with about 40 different communities on projects like this of various shapes and sizes. Collaborations are done by people, not organizations. What I mean by this is it's important, if whatever institution you're at or tribe or entity, it's important to work out the things at that level of that big sort of institutional or archived in nation level. like policies and agreements and so forth. But those can also, don't let those get in the way of kind of simpler, easier things that can be done along the way, that can be done between people. For example, after they'd come down to digitize all that material, we had it all on a hard drive. And our higher-ups in the administration thought, oh, wait, well, they have to sign a memorandum of understanding with us first before we're going to give them that hard drive. And in retrospect, that was really stupid. That was really disrespectful, and I'm sorry that happened. But it was it was good to have that understanding and to have that MOU. But the simple task was they just want to have the stuff and look at it, and that's the whole reason we invited them to come. So what's the deal? And also, it's really easy to think of. It's good to be able to get everyone together. Say, here's the stuff we want to work on, and here's our big goals. But then it can often be difficult the next day to say, like, what do I do now? What's the next little incremental step to get there? And this is why visiting in person is indispensable when you can do it. For all the projects we've done, the ones where we've been able to meet in person, us going there or people coming to the library, those are the ones where things really work well. Because with a place like the APS, where we have Greek columns on the front of the building and Ben Franklin in a toga with a scepter looking ridiculous, it's intimidating to everybody. So it's really important to be a human person, as well as also taking care of what your institution asks you to do. And finally, just one thought. We had another nation we work with is Six Nations Polytechnic, and one of the people there gave us a wampum belt to symbolize the beginning of a partnership. And it was sort of, the design of it shows that there's a connection between us. Excuse me. And the idea is that we can, for an institution, I can only speak for on our side, that it's not really a matter of should we choose to do this or not. These connections already exist by the fact of this material, this knowledge being there all this time, and it's just a matter of what are we going to do about it. And you stay in touch and you figure it out along the way. And I'll let Betsy take it from here, and thank you very much.
Toya skanaha gyata giri hediati disna ugachine digani gira ujira kisit disna skaru de kai dakar wakana. My English name is Betsy Bissell, and I'm Bear Clan Tuscarora. And wow, you guys did an awesome job. I'm really impressed with all the work you've done. And Brian did a great job of summarizing what all we've accomplished so far in our reservation. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about our trek through life a little bit, because it kind of plays into why we wanted to get together with Brian. We from the Iroquois Confederacy, obviously, and according to our stories, we were all one family. And then along the way, we all split up and we went on our own little journeys, and we ended up in North Carolina. So we have a big history of being in North Carolina. Then in the 1700s, we had this massive war, and our nation was, well, almost obliterated. Can I say that word? Thank you. So we began a trek back home into our motherland. I think because of that, we've lost a lot of our stories, a lot of our history was gone with that. We did have our language. We kept that that's in the 1700s, 1800s. Maybe half of us spoke, because now we're into New York State. Where we're located is very a lot of farmlands. We had to deal with the farmers outside our community, and a lot of our people went to the boarding schools. We lost a lot of our language. Up to now, kind of moving it up kind of fast. When I grew up, my mother did not speak it, but my grandmother was fluent. However, my grandmother went to the boarding school, so she didn't teach it to anybody. I got into the school district. The language teacher at that time had to leave because of health issues, and we didn't have a language person. But because I was there, I had contact to a fluent speaker, my grandmother. The job was offered to me, so I took it knowing pretty much how to count to 10. So it was starting from scratch, who in the community is fluent, who can I talk to, where can I go for resources. Found one fluent speaker in the community, and at that time, probably back in the 90s that I was in that position, maybe there was a handful of fluent speakers, but just one who was willing to work with me. And I don't know why it was just one, because I feel I'm very easy to work with. But I did only have the one fluent speaker, and he was marvelous. In fact, he's still my elder that I go to this day. I worked with a couple others, one who was involved with the culture, one was involved with the history, and as we're going back and forth, when I went to my elder was like, I needed to tell, I just want to hear Tuscarora, just tell me a story. And that's where we got into some difficulty because he didn't know any. So, okay, just make something up, just give me something, Howdy, you can do it, right? So getting words from your elder is like pulling teeth, and it was very difficult. And me not knowing anything or where to go linguistic-wise, I'm starting fresh. So a lot of digging, a lot of hard work, finding out about, and he had this picture about Anthony Wallace, finding out Anthony Wallace was in our community. And this guy that he's talking to in there happened to be my husband's great-great-grandfather. So next thing you know, what do you know? Anthony Wallace shows back in our community. And he goes to my in-laws' house to say, I've been here 50 years ago. I want to see how the reservation came up, how it has grown, how it's changed. He ends up moving in with my in-laws for a while. So he had been there, I don't know how long. But anyway, that ended up, we don't have any stories. What do you know? And hearing what he did way back in, I think it was late 40s, that he was in our community. He had gotten stories from the elders because they were all speaking fluent Tuscarora at that point. Finding out that he had put them at the APS. Someone mentioned the word angry. That did come up because we're like, wait a second, those are our stories. Why did you take them there? Who did you talk to? Who did you say it was okay to do that? It was very tense, I guess is a good word, situation there, especially because he was living in the community at that point. So I think he came around to say, you know what, these people needed their history back. It was good that he knew people at the APS, on board with Brian and Tim Powell. They got together, they came up with this great idea. They brought back a lot of information, the things that are digitized. It's invaluable. I don't know, the information on there is awesome. Like I said before, I have one fluent speaker that I work with. Pulling teeth is what we do every day. Get in there and we just go for the information. I'm not a linguist, so I had to learn through looking through all the papers. What did this mean? He said it this way. How can you say it that way? And of course, as a fluent speaker, he's just going to tell you because that's how you say it. Well, you said ratgatu here. You said ru newabs over here. This is ra. I know that's a he. Why is it a ru over here? Because that's how you say it. All right. So I I did my fair share of, digging. So I did a lot of work. But along comes these digitized forms, and there's like charts of what the old linguists did, which was, this is why. It's a state of, stuff like that. But it just has pushed us to the next level. It's gotten us to a level where we can say, that's why it's this way. You put this here because of this, and now we can understand that a little bit better. Also having the audios, the audio recordings are priceless. Our language, because we're of the Iroquois family, you have your other 5 nations. We all have very similar traits when we speak. Although the other 5 nations might not think that we sound like them because they have like a and a kind of nasalness, and ours is more like an We've lost, if we hear our old recordings, I've lost hearing that sound because Howdy doesn't speak that way. And having only one speaker, you don't hear how everybody else says it. And him only talking to me, I said to Howdy one time, I said, I feel bad for you. You don't have anyone to speak to. He goes, yes, I do. And I said, well, Who? He said, you. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, now it's a little scary here. But that nasal sound is so pronounced in those recordings that we're trying to pull back that sound, and we say to the kids, so now we let the kids hear it. This is, it's not as, I'm not as nasally as we were, but this is how it is. And some people really pick that up, and because they hear it all the time, they can pronounce that sound a little bit better. So it's been, like I said, invaluable to us. So I know we're running late on time, so I will say, it was great. I'm thankful. I'm very thankful that we did get in touch with Brian and Tim. It was an awesome experience. You do have to get things in order. You do have to have a committee. You do have to iron all your things, everything out, so you have everything planned. We are not at that point where you guys are, where you can share it online yet. We're not there yet. We do have the information. I'm looking at the language part of it, along with Tina and Trish back there. But the history part of it, I know my past colleague, because I did retire, he's looking into the history part of it, and we're pulling out stories. And it's really cool with the stories because, we've heard this, but we don't know, how much of it is true. And then you see some of the stories pop up, and it was written down, and we're like, a little validation there. That's pretty cool. So anyway, thank you for listening to me, and I'll turn it back over to you.
So, I like I said, I hope we can open us up to discussion or questions for our panelists. The observation that I will make is that, working at the Smithsonian or someplace like the American Philosophical Society, these are monolithic, huge institutions, and we have the benefit of having resources and we have collections, and it creates a power imbalance. But what Brian was saying about collaboration happens between human beings. It's not exactly between organizations. It's between people working together. And I feel like that's maybe the primary takeaway, is that if you can build relationships as individuals, as human beings with one another, between institutions, employees of institutions, and members of communities, that's how collaboration is going to work, true collaboration. So having said that, any questions? Yes.
I can't help but think of when you're putting the text in the language of the people, was there any concern about how other people might use that language? Because I know in my tribe, when some people use terms to name their dog, to name their car company, and so I wondered if there was any regulation or any kind of appropriation guidelines to follow when making these releases on public spaces?
Well, so the way I would, from the Smithsonian's perspective, from the National Museum of the American Indians perspective, that's exactly the kind of thing that we work out on a tribe by tribe, nation by nation basis. So working with Nina, she had spoken with her elders, her tribal council, and that was not an issue. But if we were to have a similar collaboration with Hopi, and that's a concern, we would address that issue. We would address that concern differently. So I think it's a totally valid point, but it's something that's negotiated anew every time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just need help on that part too, for people to understand that and understand that when they make things wrong and appreciate the values of that work, and those things are being lost in understanding that we share things that we need.
Definitely. Anyone else? This isn't going to work if you guys don't like the idea of discussion. Oh, great.
So in both of these cases, your institutions already have the records. Are there cases where you're working with tribes where you don't actually have any materials from them and you're working with them on fresh collecting?
Not in the case of NMAI, at least not in the case of NMAI's archive. I can't speak for APS.
Usually with APS, the occasion by which we first come in contact is because they've heard about materials, or we've done outreach. Sometimes the answer may be no, we don't there's nothing at APS from there, but you should talk to these other places. Once in a while, the question does, a community will ask, like, we have stuff or we would like to produce stuff. Do you take new stuff? And we say that we do, but we don't want to be acquisitive about it. We want to be neutral to say, like, we understand that there's pros and cons to that for a lot of reasons. And whatever you decide is the best thing, we'll tell you what we're able to do and how we can develop policies that reflect your guidance and how it should be used. We do have a fund where we give funding to linguists and other folks who are doing short-term fieldwork projects. And in the past years, there weren't really good guidelines on how they should do those collecting projects. We kind of relied upon their institutions, if they're from the university or something, to have that. But now we're fixing that to say, like, we expect you to have these following ethical guidelines on how you do things, and here's what we'd like to know. So is that?
I was also going to add, for NMAI, we are collecting new materials, but it's really focused on contemporary Native organizations like the National Congress of the American Indian, where we would have a working relationship with them from the beginning. But for sort of cultural heritage materials, if someone comes to us with these materials, we will absolutely encourage them to donate them to their tribal libraries and museums, because that's where they should belong. So that hasn't really come up too much, but...
Yeah, I was going to actually... What Rachel said is exactly right. Our current collecting program focuses more on the contemporary Native experience as sort of manifested through activist organizations, writers, artists. So we don't collect a lot of cultural heritage documentation. That's often done by anthropologists, and we direct those people to the National Anthropological Archive or someplace like that. And we have such a legacy of material that we already need that needs interpretation, like community interpretation, that's going to keep us busy forever. Anybody else?
And I want to say also often the way to answer the question is, if we get it from community, say, well, here's some various resources we've heard about, or other communities have done what you're talking about. So to help, if I have information that can help them figure out how they want to do it, just to share that, like.
Yes.
I have a question for Betsy. The gentleman that you're speaking with that will only speak with you, has he listened to the tapes that you have at APS?
You know what? I need to get it in a form where I can turn the volume up, because right now I can't. And his hearing is going. My elder is 95, and he still works with me, but his hearing is going, so that's an issue. But no, I definitely want to share some stuff with him. It was difficult to choose which one to go with, because some of it is wordless, some of it is like, well, actually he has heard some of them. There's stories, and it's all straight in language, and I'll say to him, can you understand this? And he'll say, well, some of it. And that's it. So it's, well, what can you tell? Tell me a little bit. So I don't know if it's, he can't hear it, they talk too fast, because he's talking with me. I'm the only other speaker he talks with, so my speech is way slower than his, but he might not be at that level of, a really fluent speaker. So that might be an issue too. But I did find some where the guy was just doing basic sentences, boom, 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 with a little translation with it. So I think we're going to pull those out and see what he says about those. But yeah, I definitely want to do that with him.
And you're in New York, right?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
I was just curious, and this is for Brian, right? Is that okay? Yes. I saw on that map. There's it's huge. It's like a huge spread. And I was kind of curious about that, and then also specifically wondering if you'd be able to tell me what the ones in Ontario were about, like just broadly,
Well, a number of Haudenosaunee communities, some Anishinaabe, some Cree way up in the northern part, and also sort of near over the border with Manitoba. can remember a few of them, but not all of them. But I could give you more information. If you
Yeah, I'm just curious to know a little bit more, so maybe after this, I can chat with you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Guha.
So, thank you all. I want to comment on you for a terrific effort. I was very curious, though, with Nina's project in terms of embedding or foregrounding native cultural perspectives in the public record. And I wonder if you could speak to that from the institutional perspective, and also Nina, if you can follow up on that, I know you're from Nancy as well. Is that something that is happening, to your knowledge, in other sort of cultural institutions like yours? That's an impossible question.
Well, I mean, I can only speak for NMAI's archive. I mean, I don't even want to speak for the entire museum. But what I will say about NMAI's archive is that our perspective is that we are the stewards of sovereign nations' cultural heritage, and we are going to, when given the opportunity, foreground their voice. That's kind of, I mean, I don't want to say it dismissively, but it's almost like that's the point. And while, you know, something Rachel said that I think is really important to think about is we use all kinds of standards. We have data standards, we have content standards, we have descriptive standards, we have, you name it. But within those standards, there is flexibility. And, you know, I think that an easy example, and I'm not actually calling you personally out on it, but like Library of Congress subject headings are known to be inadequate for describing Native American collections. And so, we're like just, yeah, no, I mean, it's literally your fault. And but no, you know, we know that as information professionals, we know that as indigenous native professionals know that. So how are we going to work around that? And it's that within these data standards, within these content standards, there are other places that we can put tribal, you know, cultural knowledge. And the only way we're going to ever figure that out is by working directly with communities. But you know, ATOM is full of very creative people, and we'll accomplish that by working together. I have one last thing I want to say. So we are very fortunate at NMAI. We currently have a vacancy in our archive. We are hiring an entry-level archives technician. The vacancy announcement is going to post on Monday. I strongly encourage any of you who are interested in moving to Washington, D.C. to work at NMAI, please apply, or please encourage archivists that you know, people who are just getting started in their careers, to apply. Go to USA Jobs on Monday, Monday evening, and look it up, because I think it's a really special opportunity, and we really love to have somebody who's engaged with ATOM come work with us.
And if you need any more information about it, come find Michael or myself after, and we'll give you more information.
Yes. Thank you for coming.